Before we begin, thank you very much to Gabriel H. for joining the Patreon campaign. Very appreciated. Thank you very much for the support. Thank you everyone for pitching in. A little reminder, yes, Patreon is the reason I am able to continue doing this. It is the reason I am able to continue making videos on a daily basis and really focus on this channel. So if you would like that to continue, please consider supporting. You get a shout out at the lowest levels. Higher levels get you access to the exclusive Discord. And at the highest level, you get to ask me for whatever type of video you want. No limits as long as it's within TOS. Yeah, you can basically just make me your dancing monkey and do anything. So hopefully that's appealing because that's what I'm offering. But thank you everyone who helps keep this channel alive. It does mean the world to me. Thank you very much. Okay, so the brand new series, the brand new era of Transformers comic books has begun. And this has big shoes to fill. Okay, IDW 2.0 had a rocky start. It had a rocky life, let's be honest here. But we're really following on the heels of IDW 1.0, which is the longest running story Transformers ever got to tell. And it is one of the, okay, it has detractors, but it genuinely, to me, has some of the best written stories that I've ever seen in Transformers. Some of the most fleshed out characters and some of the best moments. There's a lot of thrilling stuff in IDW's books and stories and intrigues that I never expected to be interested in that was delivered so well, I had to see it every month. So there's big shoes to fill here. So now we're at Skybound. We're at Robert Kirkman's company. The same company as Walking Dead, by the way. So they have legacy. They have successful comic book runs. So for the purpose of this review, we are going to be reviewing issue 1. I'll let you know what I think of this new direction for the Transformer comic books. However, there are a few caveats to this. Number 1, I'm only going to use one visual. There's only one picture in this entire review that comes specifically from the book that was not already shown off in previews. For the sake of keeping it as clean as possible, I am going to only be using visual examples from other sources and from previously released public material. The preview pages, the cover arts that have been publicly shown, just so you have some kind of visual to look at while I describe exactly what happened and what I think of the comic book. So to preserve it as much as possible, we are going to keep it to just one specific example. And that is only because there's no other visual I can show you. But for the most part, yeah, we're going to respect the book. And I'm also going to respect the fans who want to read the book because, for starters, we're going to talk about this book spoiler-free. Now, once this image goes away, all bets are off. I'm just going to tell you what happens in the book. So if you want to read it for yourself, untainted, and actually want to go in with a clean mind, here you go. This is your warning. Once this picture goes away, we're getting into it. So first off, general thoughts in the book. So the art style I'm going to get used to, I feel. It's a little bit grittier. In some ways it's grittier. In some ways it's more simple than the art that I've been used to from my Transformer comic books. I'm not quite sure if I like it just yet or not. It reminds me of like a more refined version of like the old Marvel comic book art, or like a modernized take on that art style. So it's a weird one to get used to, but I think I will get used to it as I read this book. I think it'll just become just part of the tone and part of just how it goes. But it's obviously attempting to be just a little bit grittier in art style. Now, does that extend to the story? Because I think a big thing that a lot of people expected of this book, because it's done by, the same crew, or at least in the same company as The Walking Dead, and a company that is known for producing more gritty and more realistic and more, let's be honest, like adult-oriented books. How is that going to adapt to Transformers, and are they going to work that in? And I will say, yeah, it's a little bit more gruesome than I expected. There is blood. Characters die. And it's not really spoiler because it doesn't take very long to get to some of these things. So I definitely feel like they are going for a more mature route. Now, how well delivered that maturity is, that's more subjective. To be honest here, the story for the book feels like we're retreading a little too much old ground. It feels a little bit too familiar when I'm looking for a fresh start to the Transformer brand. We're getting that now with Earthspark, and it's doing something very different for the cartoons. Obviously, there's a lot more comic book stories than animated stories, so they do have less room to do something fresh, but there's still room to do so. And that's kind of what I was hoping for, and instead what I got feels very familiar. And that might not be the worst thing because it's going to hit nostalgic. It's going to feel like, like starting up, like it's going to feel like turning on like an HD remake of your favorite game where like it's the graphics and the visuals are modern, but you're going through very familiar territory. It's slipping into comfortable shoes for the first time in a long time. For some, it's going to be for that vibe. For me, that's kind of after like a new flavor. I found I was missing it. And what was done in exchange for new flavor was what I consider shock value. There are shock value moments in this book. And granted, it's only issue 1. So shock moments could pay off. And then some of it is to set the tone, but others, it just feels like this better lead to something. This better lead to something, and this wasn't just a waste of time. So there's a split between that. So overall, if I'm keeping spoiler free, the book itself, the human side of it has some intrigue. The Transformer side of it still feels a little familiar, and yeah, it's going to hit more mature than a lot of Transformer stories, at least if the first issue is anything to go off of. I'm not sure that's for the best. I've got to give it more time. It's an okay start. Personally, it's not the start I would have wanted, though. So there's your spoiler free. Go into it with, I don't know if that inspires you to go read it for yourself. It's not really meant to. It's just me speaking my honest opinions about it. But what does that leave? So let's now begin the spoiler section. So as far as we know, this is our Autobot crew, and this is our Decepticon crew. So the way this works is very similar to the original cartoon. Teletran 1 starts reconstructing bodies on board the Ark, and it's doing so randomly. In the original cartoon, it does Skywarp first, because it just happens to be Skywarp is closest. But in this one, it's Starscream that's brought back first, which kind of makes sense a little bit. But they kind of get interrupted as Teletran 1 is trying to repair other characters. There is an interruption. We'll talk about the interruption when it's a little bit more prudent. However, just know that like there is room for more characters who are on board the Ark to eventually join the storyline. But for now, they've cut that off completely. So we're just dealing with the crew of 5 Autobots and the crew of 5 Decepticons, which does leave a big question. And it's a question that Skybound is actually asking on social media. Where is Megatron? There's no indication. He is briefly mentioned by Soundwave, and Starscream will have none of it. He is the leader of the Decepticons now. He does not want to hear of Megatron. Obviously, there's something more. He's not seen amongst any of the deactivated bodies on board the Ark. There's no evidence of Megatron even being on the Ark. So we're kind of left to wonder exactly where he is. And that's kind of the mystery. So we do set up a mystery that is kind of intriguing. That, the lead villain of Transformers is just absent. And that kind of plays a little bit of intrigue for future ones and gives Starscream something to panic about. And I'm sure trying to keep these Decepticons in line, who are constantly asking about Megatron, is going to be a challenge. So I'm expecting Starscream's rule, even over 4 Decepticons, to be a trying one, to say the least. On the human side of things, we do have these 2 characters who Spike was named in the preview pages. So we knew that this was a new take and design for Spike. But that is Carly. Straight up G1 name. Carly is the girl in this one. She's not named in any of the preview pages, which was weird. In the book, she is. And I kind of like them so far. So like in the original cartoon, they're supposed to be teenagers. They're supposed to be the human connection characters. They act very adult. I mean, Spike's an oil rig worker. He's a construction worker. So, like, obviously, he's a little bit more mature than just a standard teenager. But, like, Carly's just like, like, I think, like, early college student. And she's supposed to be brilliant. And she is brilliant. She is actually written very intelligently but they're supposed to still be, essentially kids, but they act very, very adult. Here they do strike very much as teenagers. They've got a few problems to deal with. They've got a few, like familial things, and they're dreamers still. So they strike very much like younger characters here, and that's not a bad thing. It's definitely a different direction for Spike and Carly. The human interest here, what they try to pull you in with human character story-wise is with Sparkplug, who's just Sparky in this script. Sparky is the first thing we see in the book because he's either having a dream or a flashback. It's not clear. And it's literally the first thing we see in this book is the rear of the Ark, and then the panel below it is a soldier with a bullet wound in the head. Remember how I said this one is grittier? Yeah, it's things like that. So right off the bat, you find out, this is going to be bloodier. This is going to be a lot more adult than standard Transformer fare. We've literally one of the first human we've seen on the pages is dead and bleeding out of the head. We don't know if it is now my brain says it's a flashback. My brain says it's a flashback, but there's also something that lends itself to it actually being some kind of dream. Because Spike actually finds Sparky at the bar, and he's barely been there since noon, and it's still a work day. So we're dealing with a spark plug who is a day drinker, which is never a healthy thing. And it's to cope with something. They aren't very clear about it, but it does. There is some indication that Spike is aware of Sparkplug's concern over the same thing happening to him. So I'm assuming it's a brother. I'm assuming Buster from the Marvel Comics is a thing in this universe, but clearly some kind of tragedy has happened to him that's led to Sparkplug developing alcoholism. And so that's where I kind of think maybe that was a dream. Maybe like Buster in this one was a soldier who died in battle, and Sparkplug in a drunken stupor is actually imagining that. It could very well just be a flashback because it is point of view. I'm not sure. They left it vague intentionally. It's probably going to be a few issues before we find out, but it's definitely caused rifts between Spike and Sparkplug. It's not the happy-go-lucky father-son relationship you see here, and it's absolutely led to Sparkplug having some really unhealthy habits and just generally just not being who he was before. So they're going to tell a much more serious story with these. And again, alcoholism not something Transformers has ever touched before. Granted, they're all machine robots. Obviously, they're machine robots. What am I talking about? They're all robotic. So outside of like one episode where they did it as a gag and maybe a few scenes at McAdams or Swerve's bars, you don't really see drunk Transformers, much less like alcoholic Transformers. That's a little different. So we don't really have that in Transformers. What we're going to do was Sparkplug, apparently. So that's their thing. So let's actually discuss what we actually saw of the Transformers in this one. So when I said that this was a very familiar, like this felt like we're retreading old ground, here we are again inside the Ark, where all the bodies of these deactivated Transformers are, just like the first episode of G1. The Decepticons invade the Ark, they crash on Earth. Something happens to wake them up millions of years later. Or maybe in this case, centuries later, because the time scale is different. They actually describe the wars going on for hundreds of years instead of millions of years. So they're tightening the frame up a little bit. Now, if that actually leads to something, that might be interesting, but otherwise, this kind of feels, I don't know. It takes a little bit of like the magic out of it a little bit to just kind of like, yeah, it's war's been just going on for a few hundred years. But yeah, the same thing that happens in G1 happens here. The difference is actually kind of clever. They actually combined this with Fire in the Sky. Remember how the first thing we see in Transformers in this universe is in Void Rivals, where Jetfire is reawakened. Well, Jetfire is the first functioning Transformer we see. He flies into the Ark and manages to repair it enough to get its repair systems working. And of course, because it's his best friend from before the war, he starts with Starscream. That's actually a little bit clever. That's a little bit clever. So it's not some random chance thing like a volcanic eruption or human interference or anything like that. It is literally Skyfire woke up first instead of last in this one. And he's the reason that Starscream woke up first. Being completely unaware that a civil war was going on and not knowing what a Decepticon is, wakes up Starscream. Okay, so that's actually kind of clever writing. To kind of like merge the two together, that works. I actually really, really like that. Remember how I said this story relies on shock value? The first thing that happens when Starscream is awake and functioning, he kills Bumblebee. Straight up shot in the head. Now, I should point out, in this one, the Transformers who are destroyed on the Ark are literally in just scattered pieces. And when Teletran 1 is putting them together, it's literally like magnets are pulling every part of them back into the places they go. So who knows what level of damage these Transformers can recover from. We know there is such a thing as fatal damage, where we see it with Jetfire, because when Jetfire objects to this, he gets blasted in the gut, and that's enough to kill him. That's enough to kill him. So Bumblebee and Jetfire are both dead before the end of this issue. Bumblebee might not be completely dead. That's not totally confirmed. Optimus is very sad about it, but it's not totally confirmed. Jetfire is very dead. And as he goes on, he is very dark and morose in his descriptions of things. He is like very, very negative. Like bitterly negative. It does kind of remind me of like Walking Dead style writing and atmosphere, where it does not feel as jovial as Transformers really should be. It's very morose. It's very doom and gloom. Granted, he's dying at the time, so that might have played into it. It's just not the tone I want in Transformers, Like, it just felt off. It felt like you're trying too hard to be dark. So yeah, like I said, there's shock value writing in this. So what happens on board the Ark is Teletran 1 is just randomly putting Transformers together until enough Decepticons are up that they can start influencing it. So like they intentionally get Soundwave up so his cassettes can also join the fight. So you actually have a lot of things going on. It restores enough Autobots for them to load up Prime's trailer and get out, because the only two that are functioning enough to actually fight is Optimus and Ratchet. And they have to make a break for it. And because the Decepticons are now in control and they are now influencing Teletran 1 to start rebuilding their allies first, we see like Teletran trying to rebuild Thundercracker and Reflector. Optimus destroys Teletran 1 in a desperate attempt to get this to stop, which is kind of a big play, granted. But yeah, that's why we're limited in how many Autobots and Decepticons we have, because the one thing that actually manages to repair them on Earth, like it did in the G1 cartoon, has now been disabled, and at the moment, between lack of energon and lack of parts, they don't have the ability to fix it. Now, Wheeljack is one of the surviving Autobots, so he probably has the brains to do it, but they need to regain control of the Ark, which right now seems like it's going to be under Decepticon command for a while. Puts the Autobots on the back foot. That's a twist I like. That the Autobots really don't have a home base right now. They're going to be hiding out in a quarry, but they don't have the Ark. The Decepticons do. They have the resources of the Ark, which is going to make it a little bit more interesting. During the fight scene, here's the one visual from this book I am actually going to show you. During this fight scene, they do this. And I was struggling to figure out exactly what this was supposed to be. Why is Prime holding on? Did he straight punch Starscream and the perspective is just really off? No, his whole arm is vibrating. Did he clothesline him? Did he like give him the full arm thing? And then I look a page ahead as the fight continues. And without showing you any further art from the book, because you got to see this to believe it, Optimus breaks out the German suplex. Out of nowhere. Which reminds me that the guy who's writing and drawing this book is a pro wrestling fan. He literally does a book called Do a Power Bomb. So he's doing pro wrestling moves against Starscream and Optimus Prime, which makes me look back at this, and the frame before this is Prime grabbing Starscream from behind, which means he pulled him around in order to deliver the clothesline, which makes this what is called a ripcord lariat, or for some fans out there, the Rainmaker, which is the finishing move of Katsuchika Okada, one of the best wrestlers in the world. I love that I know this stuff sometimes. So that's the situation we're in. Decepticons have the Ark. Autobots are in retreat. The humans, Spike and Carly, could tell who the good guys in the fight were. Prime didn't know what these little squishy things were, but he still tried to protect them during the fight. So they helped Prime by pushing his gun closer to him when he got pinned down. That helped get Ravage off of his back and helped get everyone to escape. So Spike and Carly lead them to a quarry, like an abandoned quarry they know, and that's apparently going to be our hideout for the Autobots for now, which puts them on the back foot. It's not a bad way to do that. So we got familiar ground with the entire setup and the origin story, but we do have a little bit of new stuff going on. We have a little bit of change in dynamic, and how much they do with it, that's going to make it what the story is going to be about. And then Starscream goes off to find Energon. And it looks like Sparkplug might still be an oil worker, because he ends up at Sparkplug's workplace to drain it of energy. And he actually does what you'd think a Decepticon would have done a long time ago. He picks up one of Sparkplug's co-workers, kind of studies the human for a second, and then does that. First time I've seen a Decepticon actually do that. This book's not going to play around. This book is going to be graphic. This book is going to be an adult-oriented Transformer story. It is definitely being influenced by the style of writing that Skybound is known for, and it is not going to make any compromises in that to try and match previous Transformer stories. So that's the tone we're getting, and that's going to be issue 1. Like I said, I'm not sure it's the start I wanted for Transformers. The tone is not what I would really favor, but there are some interesting twists to it. Some are done for shock value, but there's others that might tell a promising story. And while this first issue setup is very familiar, I do feel like between the absence of Megatron, the flipped situation with the Decepticons controlling the Ark, and having very limited resources and numbers on both sides, is going to lead to something that is a little bit more interesting than your standard Transformer storyline. So I'm going to give it a watch. I'm not going to review it every single month or anything, unless this video does really well. But for now, I am going to read, and I'm going to give it a good chance. So that's my thoughts on the first issue of our new Transformers series. Let me know if you've read the book. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the whole thing, and I will see you next time.
I'm like, I think you guys got this. I will back away, and I will see you all later.
You've got this handled.
Alaffi's like, really? You're not gonna help me? Like, it's fine now.
It's like these disgusting creatures breathing down my neck, and you're all just like, I believe in you. You got this.
All right, you seem to have this. 5 minutes.